My stepsister and ex-husband invited me to their wedding, so I brought someone who made her panic. People say betrayal always comes from those closest to you. I never thought my stepsister would prove that right. My husband, Jerry, and I had been together for 12 years, married for 10. It wasn't a perfect marriage, but for a long time it was good. We laughed together. We made plans for the future. We built a home. And then, one day, it all fell apart. Not because of time. Not because of stress. But because the man I loved, the one I had trusted with my life, chose her. My stepsister. Karen. I should have seen it coming. Looking back, I see that the signs were there. Jerry became distant. Our date nights grew awkward. The conversations that used to flow so easily became forced, strained. And then there were the little things. The way he kept his phone closer than usual. The late nights at work that never quite made sense. The way he looked at me, not with love, but with obligation. I told myself it was just a rough patch. That we'd find our way back to each other. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The truth hit me on a Friday night. I had planned a surprise dinner for Jerry, something to remind us of how things used to be. I drove to his office, excitement bubbling in my chest. Only when I got there, his car was already gone. And instead of calling him, I decided to follow a sudden, gut-wrenching instinct. I drove after him, weaving through the streets until he pulled into a bar. At first, I thought maybe he just needed space. A drink alone. A moment to clear his head. But then she walked in. My stepsister. Karen. My breath caught in my throat. I knew that back. That posture. That irritating way she tossed her hair over her shoulder like she was the center of the universe. Then she turned. And I saw her face. My stomach dropped. Because the look she gave Jerry wasn't friendly. It wasn't casual. It was intimate. Like they shared a secret. And then, he reached across the table and took her hand. Just like he used to do with me. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember getting into my car. All I remember is the numbness. The way my hands gripped the steering wheel as I drove home in silence. Jerry came back later that night, smelling like whiskey and guilt. He didn't bother hiding it. Didn't even try. He slipped into bed like nothing had happened. And I lay there, staring at the ceiling, making a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to make sure that they regretted this for the rest of their lives. I didn't confront him right away. That would have been too easy. Too expected. Instead, I did something Jerry and Karen never thought I was capable of. I waited. I watched. And I planned. For the next few weeks, I acted like nothing had changed. I smiled when Jerry came home late. I kissed him goodnight, even when his breath reeked of lies. I even listened patiently as Karen continued playing the role of a loving sister. You know, I'm so glad we're family, she told me one afternoon, sipping the coffee I had made her. I don't know what I'd do without you. I almost laughed. Because the truth? She had no idea what was coming. The first step was gathering evidence. Not for the courts, no, this wasn't about legal revenge. This was about making sure everyone saw them for who they really were. I went through Jerry's phone when he was asleep. Copied messages, emails, and photos. I even managed to retrieve deleted texts from his cloud backup. And what I found? It was worse than I had imagined. This wasn't just an affair. This was a full-blown relationship. Karen had been sneaking into our lives for months. They had gone on trips together. Exchanged gifts. Even talked about what their future would look like without me. And the most disgusting part? Karen was proud of it. She doesn't deserve you, baby. She never did. I'll give you the life she never could. Once she's out of the way, everything will be perfect. I gritted my teeth as I scrolled through their plans for my replacement. They weren't just betraying me. They were erasing me. At least, that's what they thought. Once I had everything I needed, I set the real plan in motion. First, I visited a lawyer. A divorce attorney. I made sure every asset I had worked for stayed mine. Jerry wasn't going to walk away with a single thing I had built. Then I started leaking pieces of the truth. Subtly. To friends. To family. To everyone Karen and Jerry cared about. And I watched as their perfect little secret started unraveling. The cracks appeared faster than I expected. Karen's job? She worked for a company that valued reputation. A quiet anonymous tip about her workplace affair was all it took for HR to launch an investigation. Jerry's image? Tainted. People at work started whispering. His colleagues, the ones who used to respect him, now looked at him differently. And all the while? I waited for the final blow. Because of the real destruction? Hadn't even begun yet. The cracks in their perfect little world were spreading faster than I expected. Karen was distracted. She didn't notice how people had started treating her differently. Her work friends, the ones who used to worship her, were suddenly distant. Her boss, who once praised her, now barely acknowledged her existence. And Jerry? He was starting to feel it too. His coworkers weren't as friendly. His phone buzzed with fewer invitations, less respect, less importance. And yet, they were still so oblivious. Still sneaking around. Still believed they were winning. Until the moment I made sure they weren't. I chose a Sunday morning for the final blow. A perfect day. Clear skies. The kind of morning that should have been peaceful. Instead, it was going to be a war zone. That morning I sent out a group message. To family. To friends. To anyone who had ever believed in us as a couple. I attached screenshots of Jerry's messages with Karen. I made sure to include the ones where they planned their future together. The ones who laughed at me behind my back. The ones where Karen called me pathetic for not seeing it sooner. Finally, I added a note. Since Karen and Jerry couldn't wait until I was out of the picture, I figured I'd save them the trouble and step aside. I won't be attending any more family events where they are present. Consider this my formal goodbye to those who still support them. Then, I hit send. The reaction was immediate. Calls. Texts. Notifications are blowing up. Some people were horrified. Some were furious. And some were just waiting for the chaos to unfold. And unfold it did. Because within an hour, everything exploded. Karen was the first to call me. Her number flashed on my screen over and over. I let it ring. Then I got a text. What the hell did you do? I smirked. She finally understood. Jerry's reaction was even better. He stormed home. Slammed the door. Marched into the living room like a man who had just lost everything. Because he had. What did you do? He demanded. I didn't look up. I kept folding my clothes, neatly stacking them into the suitcase I had already prepared. I told the truth, I said simply. Something you never had the guts to do. His face turned red. He started talking, shouting about how I had ruined his reputation. How I was making things worse. How this didn't have to happen. And I just laughed. Because he still didn't get it. He thought the problem was me exposing him. Not the fact that he had destroyed our marriage in the first place. By the time he realized I wasn't arguing back, his anger had shifted. His voice softened. We can fix this. I smiled. There's nothing left to fix. And with that, I zipped up my suitcase, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door. Leaving behind a man who never deserved me. Karen thought she had one. She thought she had stolen my life. But all she did was took my trash out for me. And I had never felt lighter. Walking out that door should have been the end of it. But people like Karen and Jerry don't just disappear quietly. They linger. They try to rewrite the story. And sure enough, within a day, the damage control began. Karen reached out to anyone who would listen. She painted herself as the victim. Told people I had overreacted, that I had blown things out of proportion. Jerry played his part too. He wasn't a cheater, he was a man who had made a mistake. A mistake that should have stayed private. But the thing about the truth? Once it's out, there's no taking it back. People started picking sides. Some family members wanted to stay neutral. Others were furious. One of my aunts, someone who had always been supportive of me and Jerry as a couple, called to say she was disgusted. I never trusted that girl, she admitted. And now look at her. Karen had been bragging. Acting like she had won. Like she had finally gotten what she wanted. That only made me more determined to make sure she lost everything. I didn't need to lift a finger. The wedding venue that had been booked for our anniversary was now cancelled. The friends and family Jerry had always relied on, most of them stopped speaking to him. His job? The promotion he had been waiting on? That vanished too. Turns out that when people at work started whispering about how he had cheated on his wife with her stepsister, it didn't exactly make him look leadership material. And Karen? She was about to get hit even harder. Her job had already been shaken by the workplace affair rumor. But when word spread about how she had wrecked my marriage and then tried to play the victim, people started talking. Clients canceled meetings. Coworkers stopped inviting her to after-work events. And her entire professional reputation took a massive hit. She wasn't just the woman who had an affair. She was the woman who had stabbed her sister in the back. And nobody trusts a traitor. Jerry eventually tried to reach out. Not to apologize. Not to take responsibility. But to complain. You ruined my life. That was all he said. No explanation. No understanding of why this was happening. He genuinely believed this was my fault. That I should have stayed quiet. That I should have let them be happy. But people like Jerry never understand consequences. And by the time he did, it was too late. Karen was desperate now. The life she had stolen from me wasn't turning out the way she had imagined. Jerry was broke, humiliated, and struggling. She was isolated, professionally tainted, and barely holding on. And that's when she did something I never expected. She reached out. To me. A message popped up on my phone, her name flashing on the screen. For a second I considered ignoring it. But curiosity won. I opened it. I think we need to talk. I stared at the words, shaking my head. Because now she wanted to talk? Now, when everything had fallen apart? She had burned every bridge. And she still thought there was a way to fix this. I wasn't sure what she expected. An apology? A fake attempt at making peace? Whatever it was, she was about to learn something very important. Some betrayals can't be undone. And I wasn't the same person she had walked all over. I was done with both of them. And this conversation? It was going to be her final mistake. Karen's message sat on my screen for a long time. I think we need to talk. Like she believed I owed her anything. Like she thought we could somehow undo the mess she had created. I could have ignored it. Could have blocked her the way I had blocked Jerry. But I didn't. Because of some things? Some things deserve a proper ending. I agreed to meet her. Not because I cared about what she had to say. Not because I wanted an apology. But because I wanted to see it. To see the regret, the fear, the realization that her perfect little fantasy had completely crumbled around her. And when I walked into that cafe and saw her sitting there, hunched over a cup of coffee, looking small and exhausted, I knew I had made the right choice. This wasn't the smug, arrogant woman who had laughed about stealing my husband. This wasn't the gloating stepsister who had flaunted her victory. This was just a woman who had lost everything. And she knew it. I sat across from her, silent, waiting. She fidgeted, running a hand through her hair, avoiding eye contact. I don't know where to start, she mumbled. I folded my arms. Try the part where you slept with my husband, I said coolly. She winced. I was selfish, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought I was winning something, but now I see I was just ruining everything. Her hands trembled as she picked up her coffee. Jerry and I, we're not happy. No surprise there. They had built their relationship on betrayal, secrecy, and stolen affection. That kind of thing never lasts. She swallowed hard, then whispered something so pathetic I almost laughed. I miss you. I raised an eyebrow. You miss me. She nodded, eyes glassy. I thought getting Jerry would make me feel like I finally had something over you. But I don't. I lost you. And now I don't have anyone. I stared at her, unblinking. Because of this? This wasn't an apology. This was just another attempt to make herself the victim. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she had to deal with the consequences. And that? It wasn't my problem. I don't forgive you, Karen. The words came out steady, controlled. She flinched, her hands gripping the edge of the table. I don't expect you to, she stammered. But I just wanted to say it. I nodded. Now you have. I stood up, ready to leave. Karen's voice cracked as she spoke again. Is there any way we can fix this? I turned back, meeting her gaze. No. And with that I walked away. Karen had gotten exactly what she wanted. She had stolen my life. But in the end, it wasn't a prize. It was a curse. And she was going to spend the rest of her life living with that mistake. Walking away from that cafe felt like closing a chapter one had been forced into. For the first time in months, I wasn't looking over my shoulder wondering how things had gone so wrong. I wasn't drowning in betrayal, anger, or heartbreak. I had finally let go. Karen wanted to fix things. But some things stay broken. And she was going to have to live with that. I didn't hear from her again. At least, not directly. But people talked. Word spread. Soon, I started getting bits and pieces of the aftermath. Jerry and Karen's relationship was falling apart. Whatever excitement they had felt when they were sneaking around had vanished. Now, it was just reality. A reality filled with stress, money problems, and resentment. Jerry had lost his reputation. His career had stalled. His social circle had shrunk to almost nothing. And Karen? She was miserable. She had burned every bridge to be with him. And now that the fire had died, she was left alone in the ashes. A former friend of hers reached out to me one day. She's not doing well. Keep saying she ruined her life. I didn't reply. Because it wasn't my problem. She had made her choices. She had betrayed me. And now? She was living with the weight of those choices. That was her burden to carry. Not mine. Jerry didn't last long either. One night, I got a message from a mutual acquaintance. He moved out. They're done. I didn't need details. I already knew how it had played out. He had finally seen Karen for who she was. The jealousy, the selfishness, the obsession with trying to outshine me. And once she wasn't his forbidden thrill anymore, she was just another mistake. A mistake he had thrown his entire life away for. It was fitting. They had both thought they were winning. that they were taking something valuable from me. But in the end, they had just taken each other, and neither of them had ever been worth anything. As for me, I moved forward, got a new place, started traveling more, focused on my happiness instead of cleaning up someone else's mess. And every single day I woke up without regrets, because I had won the only battle that mattered, the one for my own life. Months turned into a year, and with time the past became exactly that, just the past. No more whispered gossip, no more messages about what Karen or Jerry were doing. No more replaying conversations in my head wondering what I could have done differently. Because now, I didn't care. I had rebuilt myself, brick by brick, piece by piece. And every day, I woke up knowing I had escaped a life I was never meant to live. I moved into my place. A home that was truly mine. No memories of Jerry's betrayal haunting the walls. No shadows of Karen lurking in the corners. Just peace. The first few months were an adjustment. For the first time in over a decade, I was truly alone. No husband, no stepsister constantly trying to outshine me. Just me. And surprisingly, it was exactly what I needed. Karen tried reaching out one last time. A short, pitiful message. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just wanted to say, I wish things had been different. I read it. I let the words sit there on my screen, waiting for a response. And then, I deleted it. Because wishing didn't change anything. She had made her choices. And I had made mine. To move forward without her. There was no fixing this. No rebuilding what she had destroyed. And frankly, I didn't want to. Jerry? He never reached out again. Maybe he finally understood he had burned every last bridge. Maybe he just couldn't stand the thought of facing me as the woman who walked away without looking back. Or maybe, deep down, he knew there was nothing left to say. Either way, it didn't matter. He had gotten exactly what he deserved. And I had gotten something far more valuable. Freedom. At first, moving on felt like a slow, unfamiliar process. I had spent so many years thinking my life would follow a certain path. Marriage. A family built on trust and commitment. A future with someone who would always stand by me. And when that future was ripped away, it took time to figure out what came next. But I did. I started traveling. I picked up old hobbies I had abandoned when my world revolved around someone else's needs. I reconnected with friends, found joy in my independence, and slowly, piece by piece, I built a life that felt like mine again. And it was so much better than anything I had left behind. One day, while out for coffee, I ran into an old friend. She had once been close to Karen. Yeah? Not so much. She hesitated before speaking, unsure if I even wanted to hear about them. I don't know if you care, but they didn't last. I already knew. I had heard whispers. But hearing it confirmed? It was a quiet kind of victory. She went on. He left her. Moved out a few months ago. She's been miserable ever since. I took a sip of my drink, completely unbothered. Figures, I said simply. And that was it. I didn't need details. Didn't need to know how ugly their breakup had been, how quickly their so-called love had crumbled under the weight of reality. Because it was always going to end this way. They had built their relationship on lies, betrayal, and stolen affection. And things like that, they never last. As for me, I was done looking back. I had stopped wondering why they did what they did. Stopped questioning whether I had missed the warning signs. Stopped thinking I had lost something worth grieving. Because I hadn't lost anything. I had been set free. One evening, while cleaning out my closet, I found an old wedding photo tucked away in a box. It was from the early years, back when I had still believed in Jerry, still thought our marriage was unbreakable. I stared at it for a long moment. Then, without hesitation, I tossed it into the trash. No second thoughts. No regret. Because this wasn't a story about loss. It was a story about freedom. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was meant to be. Hope you enjoyed this story as much as I do. Help this small channel grow by hitting that like button, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. Every bit of support means the world. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.